What's up, Marvel fans? I'm Steven from the Hills Maniacs, and welcome to the next part in my series of list videos that I'm doing throughout the year about phases 4 and 5 of the MCU. I started off with the best and worst movies from phases 4 and 5, then I talked about the best and worst heroes from phases 4 and 5, and in this one I'm going to be talking about who I thought were the 5 best villains introduced into the MCU in phases 4 and 5. The next video I do is going to be who I felt were the worst MCU villains that were introduced in phases 4 and 5, so keep an eye out for that as well. Now, the reason I'm doing these is just because I wanted to take a look back, sort of like a retrospective, to phases 4 and 5, which were basically the movies and Disney Plus shows that have kind of been leading to everything that's going to be happening in Avengers Doomsday. Obviously, it's everything from like WandaVision all the way up until I believe it was Ironheart, because then Fantastic Four was the start of Phase 6 for the MCU. So all of that is fair game for this particular type of video. So without further delay, here are my picks for the top 5 villains that were introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in phases 4 and 5. So starting out at number 5, I have Green Goblin / Norman Osborn from Spider-Man No Way Home. And when you look back at that movie, obviously there were multiple villains in that movie because it was all the villains that were pulled from the multiverse. So we got some of the Sam Raimi villains such as Norman Osborn and Doc Ock. We got some from the Amazing Spider-Man universe with the Lizard and Electro. So there were a lot of villains in that movie, but I feel like Norman Osborn in that movie was basically the main villain. He's the one that does the most heartbreaking thing and is the one that kind of tortures Peter Parker the most in that particular movie. Because obviously he's the one that kills Aunt May in that movie, so he's the one that had the most impact on not just the plot going forward from that point, but on Peter Parker in general. I just think seeing Willem Dafoe, pick up where he left off, basically, with this character, and, stepping right back into that role after years of not playing that character anymore because he was killed off in the first Spider-Man movie back in 2002, and technically came back as, a sort of vision for Harry Osborn in the third one and that kind of stuff in the second one, but it was kind of cool to see that character return, and the fact that, Willem Dafoe was able to just continue where he left off and continue to play that character as if he never even stopped, I thought was a testament to how good of an actor he really is. And it just seems like there's something more sinister about this character in this movie compared to even his performance back in the 2002 Spider-Man movie. I think it's because technically the whole time he's actually just the Green Goblin pretending to be Norman, pretending to be this normal person to get Peter to help him and that kind of stuff, and to sort of trick him so he can kill all of them. It's very chilling and unnerving from the very start when we first see him appear in Peter's universe in this movie. And I think that's what you kind of want out of a villain. You want to have this feeling of tenseness and this unnerving sensation where something is up with this character, even if they're acting normal at first, and then for them to reveal that they're a villain and have this really sinister plan and that kind of stuff. He just felt even crazier in this movie than he did in the first one. For example, when he's facing Peter Parker in this one, he's laughing at every punch, and it's almost like the Joker in the interrogation scene in the Dark Knight movie, where every punch that Batman throws at him, he's laughing about it, like it doesn't actually hurt him and stuff. He wants it, he's embracing it. There's the same kind of thing here with this fight sequence between the two of them. He was laughing, and he has that Willem Dafoe, creepy laugh that he always did back in that first movie. So it all fit really well, and Willem Dafoe did a nice job of bringing that character back to life and bringing him into the MCU. Obviously, we're probably not going to see that variation of the character ever again because they were all sent back to their own universe at the end. But I think Willem Dafoe, brought that character to life in a way that nobody else is going to really be able to portray that character, I feel like, in the same way that he did and have the same kind of impact on that character that he did all those years ago. And it was nice to see this character back one more time, at least on the big screen, just as it was nice seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Mans popping up in this movie as well. Coming in at number 4 is Kingpin, who was first introduced to the MCU, technically, I guess, back in the Daredevil Netflix series, because those have been considered canon now to the MCU. But before those were considered canon, he was introduced in the Hawkeye series. It was still the same Wilson Fisk from that series as well, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. I think his portrayal of the character of Kingpin has always been the best part of the whole Daredevil saga. I think the way that he brings that anger and rage that this character has to the screen and really portrays all of that with his gravelly voice and all that kind of stuff, I think it's unmatched. I don't think anybody else could really play the role of Wilson Fisk or Kingpin in the MCU after this performance from Vincent D'Onofrio, and even him bringing it back again in Daredevil Born Again, and he just seems even stronger in this series and stuff. Even though he is just a normal person, he doesn't have superpowers and that kind of stuff. His superpower, I guess, is like, corrupting people into joining him and that sort of thing. He's good with like speech and that kind of stuff. It's not a real superpower, but that's just how that character is, and I think they've done a nice job over the years of showing how menacing Kingpin can truly be. Like, in all honesty, he's essentially the Thanos to the street-level villains. And I think he is going to play that role in some future team-up movie or something, maybe against the Young Avengers or the Defenders or something like that if they decide to bring those characters back. Or because of how truly sort of terrifying he actually is, I could almost see him being an Avengers-level villain as well. If he's able to put together a team of like supervillains or something, I could see the Avengers going up against him even too. Like it's just, I think the performance overall from Vincent D'Onofrio plus the character of Kingpin in general and the way that they've adapted this character from the comics to the screen, like in this variation of Daredevil and the story of Daredevil and Kingpin and everything else, I thought all that was really well done. And I hope he's, not killed off anytime soon. I hope they keep him around as a character for a long time going forward. He could be one of the next big bads of the MCU if he's not considered one already by fans. Like, I think there's a lot more for them to tell with this character, and especially the fact that he's able to get under the skin of not just Daredevil, but other heroes as well, as we've seen over the last couple of years since his introduction to the MCU. I think that's a testament to how good of a villain he truly is. Like, he seems unstoppable, even without Infinity Stones and without superpowers and everything. Like, no matter what Daredevil does, he can't stop him. He can't keep him in prison because he keeps escaping, or he has people on the inside that are helping him. He's this mob boss on the same level as Thanos, and his sort of, like, criminal empire, I guess, could be considered his Infinity Stones. Like, overall, he's just a really powerful villain without actual superpowers. And I think that's what makes him so compelling, is the fact that he's able to stay that powerful no matter what the heroes throw at him, even though he is just a regular man. Next up at number 3 is actually Kang / He Who Remains / I guess Victor Timely. Now obviously, Kang was being set up as the next big bad of the MCU. He's a time-traveling villain, so it was going to tie into the fact that the Avengers time-traveled to get the Infinity Stones back, and because of that, the events of Loki play out and everything, and we find out that there's a version of Kang the Conqueror that is also He Who Remains, that sits at the end of time and, conquered all the other variants of himself to create one sacred timeline that is the current timeline of the MCU, basically, which is the reason that, the X-Men and all those characters don't exist in the MCU yet. And, for what little amount of time that we actually got to see Kang portrayed in the MCU, I thought Marvel at least did a nice job of showing how threatening he can be because there's so many different variants of him. Like if you think about it, compared to the version of him that we saw in Quantumania, which was considered the Conqueror version of himself, I think He Who Remains could actually be considered the most threatening variant of Kang the Conqueror because he was able to defeat all the other versions. So like even though he didn't get a lot of time in the MCU, I still feel like just what we got to see from the different variants that were shown to us that played a big role in both the Loki series as well as the Quantumania movie, I think they at least captured what Kang is supposed to be, even though he wasn't on screen for very long and we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him, or see how the story with Kang would have played out in the MCU had the whole Jonathan Majors thing not occurred. forcing them to pivot to, Doom for Avengers Doomsday. And speaking of the version of him in Quantumania, they kind of honestly wasted him as a villain in that movie because he was basically defeated by Ant-Man, and they kind of just brushed past that and move on, which I guess at the time, once this was filmed, they had to move away from Kang anyway, so I guess it didn't matter necessarily, but even though that all occurred and everything, and even though they made him seem just kind of like a generic one-off villain, I still feel like his presence on screen stole the show, basically. Like, you could tell there was glimpses there of them setting up how dangerous he can be, and that he truly was going to be the next big bad of the MCU. Like, they managed to put all that in there, and Jonathan Majors' performance as the three different variants that he played, I thought were really well acted and really well performed on his part, and showed us, sort of his acting chops almost, where he can play this sort of comedic goofball character with Victor Timely, or he can play this somewhat goofy character of He Who Remains, who's actually in charge of everything and knows what's going on and has this sort of sinister side to him, but you can see he's sort of containing it and just being this regular person sitting in a chair like that Loki interacts with. And then, of course, you have the Conqueror version who's got that more like raspy voice, and he's just a darker version of the character. Like, all three of those adaptations, all played by Jonathan Majors, I thought brought the character to life and showed us what he could have done probably as the main villain for the next Avengers movie if they had still gone that route. Coming in at number 2 is Wanda Maximoff / the Scarlet Witch. Now, I know obviously she was introduced to the MCU before this point, but we don't see her truly take the form of like the Scarlet Witch, the most powerful version of herself, until the WandaVision series, and then of course Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where we get to see her in her full form, basically. So that's kind of why I included her on this list, because the Scarlet Witch character was introduced in Phase 4 of the MCU, but Wanda Maximoff was introduced before that. Just to clear up any confusion there on why she's on this list. I just loved the way that they portrayed her as a horror movie villain in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. All of that with her like going through walls and like getting into people's heads, and even the dream walking into a variant of herself from the multiverse and sort of haunting the characters. She killed all the Illuminati in that movie, like all by herself, basically. Like, they made her feel truly powerful, and I wish that they had almost made her an Avengers villain because of how powerful she was. Like, making her this horror movie villain and that version of her, I felt was the best choice that they could have done to really capture how powerful the Scarlet Witch is as a character. And then you look at the version of her from like the Marvel Zombies series, or even that one episode of What If where there was zombies. Having Wanda Maximoff, or the Scarlet Witch, being the leader of the undead, like, while she is also a zombie, but she's still like fully functioning with her powers, I think that was really chilling, because it was so creepy to see her like popping up basically in places. She could still talk, but she's also a zombie. She succumbed to the zombie virus that killed all the other heroes and turned them into zombies. So her with the same powers as an undead version of herself, I thought was really creepy as well, and it made her even more terrifying. I do hope we get to see more of her, like that she's not actually just dead after the events of Multiverse of Madness, because I would like to see her as a natural villain for the Avengers, or for some other hero again in the future. I just think she works really well as that horror movie villain, which is something the MCU doesn't really have a lot of, those kind of like really creepy characters that can haunt you in your nightmares and that sort of stuff. And a villain that can like take over your mind and all that stuff is a power that not too many people possess, and I think we need to see more of that in the MCU, and hopefully we get to see more of Wanda in the future. And coming in at number 1 for me was Cassandra Nova from the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. I feel like the power that she displays in this movie and the powers that she has and everything is something we haven't really seen in the MCU that much, or really ever. Like, we've seen telepathy before in the MCU, but we've never seen somebody actually physically able to, like, reach into someone's head and, like, grab their brain and take over their mind and read their thoughts and that kind of stuff. It's really creepy seeing her fingers go through their head and everything else. That is exactly how she did it in the comics, I guess. I've seen some pictures of that as well. Or the way she can just, you know, like we saw with Johnny Storm in that movie, she basically just, like, flicked her fingers at him and he turned to dust and, like, evaporated and everything. Like, somebody that can do that and, like, rip the skin off of your bones just by pretty much looking at you. I think she was really menacing of a villain in that movie. And even though she was killed off in that movie, I wish they would have kept her around, because I could see her being maybe even like a sidekick to Doom. Like, she could have been the one that sort of helps him roll over the wastelands of the void, you know, in Secret Wars or something like that, and eventually turns on him or whatever. But she's just, like, that powerful, where she should have fought the Avengers and not just Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, it almost feels like a waste that she was killed by Deadpool and Wolverine and not, like, some more powerful heroes. But other than that, she's still displayed as this truly terrifying villain in that movie. Like I said, I just wish we would have gotten to see a little bit more of her. Maybe she could have been the villain of multiple movies or something. Not just against Deadpool and Wolverine. She could have been the villain of, like, the new X-Men movie that comes out someday, for, like, the MCU's first X-Men movie. Could have used someone like her as a villain, where it takes the whole team to take her down or something. But from what little we got to see of her, and her just being the villain of this one movie, I thought it was really well done, and that's why I think she was the best overall villain from phases 4 and 5, in my opinion. But there you go, guys. That was my list of who I felt were the top 5 best villains introduced in phase 4 and 5 of the MCU. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you agree with who I had on this list? Is there somebody that I missed out on that I should have included? Let me know all that down in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And like I said at the beginning, check out my other videos that I've done so far, where I talked about the heroes and the movies and all that stuff from phases 4 and 5, and keep an eye out for the other list video I have coming up later this year as well, where I'm going to talk about the worst MCU villains from phases 4 and 5. And as always, thank you for watching the video, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.